So, hi everyone again. My name is Natália Félix de Souza. I'm a professor at the Pontifical Catholic University of São Paulo, and I am currently one of the co-editors of the International Feminist Journal of Politics. I will be hosting our section today. So because we got more subscriptions to this webinar than we expected, we had to move this to this kind of webinar mode. Otherwise, Zoom wouldn't work properly. So this is why you cannot be speak or be seen. Your questions should be posed in the chat box, and I will read them out loud for everyone in between presentations. So if you have any questions, please do write them down here. Otherwise, we'll move on to our presentations today. The idea for this webinar was to provide an insight as to how, if you're interested to publish with IFJP, you should go about doing your research paper and all the do's and don'ts of both of the making your paper and submitting it. So we're here in 4 co-editors today. I'm Natália Félix de Souza, as I mentioned. We also have Swati Parashar from the University of Gothenburg, Elisabeth Prügl, who's at the Geneva Graduate Institute, and finally Amy Lind at the University of Cincinnati. We also have a couple of co-editors that could not be here with us today, Marysia Zalewski, and also Choi. So I can, thank you, Swati. I can see here. Okay, so Choi at Massey University and Marysia Zalewski at University of Cardiff. So yeah, you can move on. So this is basically the outline of our presentation today. First, Lisa will introduce you to the journal and the rationale for the workshop, tell you a little bit about our journal and the ideas for you not to get a desk reject. After that, Swati will talk a little bit about the kinds of formats, approaches, methodologies that we accept at the journal, and also give you some hints of how to do things differently, which is one of the visions we have for the journal. And finally, Amy will talk on how to submit what happens afterwards, some of the basics of the process. The Q&As, I will moderate the Q&As, as I said, through the chat. So please do write down your questions as they present to yourselves. And after each one of the presenters, I will read them. And so we can break this a little bit and talk a little bit about the questions that arise. So yeah, I think this is it. Lisa, you can start.
Yes, thank you very much, Natália. My name is Elisabeth Prügl. I'm at the Geneva Graduate Institute, and I'm one of the co-editors of the journal. Swati, if you can move the PowerPoint to the next slide, please. It's my job to provide a brief introduction to the journal. I think this is actually important because the first thing that most people see about a journal is probably a journal's name, and then there you try to divine as to whether this is the right journal for your paper. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a background of what IFJP is to see whether there is a match. Next slide, please. To begin with, I think it's important to emphasize that we are a peer-reviewed academic journal. So in other words, we're not in the space of a feminist magazine or something like that, but we really see ourselves as an academic journal, while at the same time insisting that we're taking a feminist positionality in terms of what we're publishing, but also in terms of the way in which we organize ourselves. And the term international signals that we're publishing on international politics broadly conceived and now broadly conceived is important here. And I'm going to have a few words on that in just a minute. We publish primarily research articles, but we also have a section on conversations and on book reviews. And I'm going to let my colleagues talk more about this as well, but it means that you can get, and I'd encourage you to also participate in the journal in these other modes, in particular with regard to book reviews. Often the book review editors are looking for people that are reviewing books. And so putting yourself forward and actually emailing one of our book review editors and say, I would like to review books, I'm available, these are my areas of expertise, is a good idea. But we are a community, and I think this is important to recall, is that journals are communities. They're made up of communities of readers, of authors, of reviewers. And our community tends to be relatively international. We like to include people from all over the world, while at the same time, I think it is necessary to recognize, and we recognize, that the origins of the journal are in the West, in the North. It was born by a group of people who were active in the International Studies Association, which is a US association, particularly in the feminist theory and gender studies section of the ISA. And it was in the 1990s, after the end of the Cold War, when feminist and other ideas came onto the field of international relations, that the journal was started. So it was started out of also an intent to intervene in the field of international relations, which is a field that, of course, traditionally is heavily focused on politics and on particular issues, most often interstate focused. But the journal, in a sense, was also a rejection of that mainstream canon of saying you cannot just look at the security politics of states vis-a-vis each other. We need to look at other levels of analysis. We have to include the way in which differences of gender, race, diversity operate in international politics. We have to include that into the study of international relations. I don't want to focus too much on this international relations background, because as editors, and our previous editors also, have been struggling to move away from international relations, because in part the framing of that field is the problem itself for us. But I think it's important to recognize these origins of the journal, because it puts also in perspective what our current efforts are with this workshop and beyond. Next slide, please. And so when this group of editors, now 3 years ago almost, started taking over the journal, we formulated a vision. And this first block formulates that vision as nurturing IFJP as a robust, dialogic, and collaborative space of accountability and transformation that challenges global injustice, structural and epistemic silencing and oppression. There's a lot packed into this half sentence. I think one of the important things to emphasize, also from the perspective of the kind of submissions we are getting, is we're a feminist journal, but that doesn't mean we are working on women only or even on gender only, but we really think of or we embrace an intersectional, post-colonial, decolonial kind of understanding of the world. And once we understand the world in that way, we recognize that we are part of that world, and that as a journal, we participate in the power structures that are out there. And so therefore, as feminists, we need to be reflective about that. And then first of all, focus on our own processes and ask, how can we be dialogic, collaborative, but in a way that keeps us also accountable, because none of us stands above the power relations that are out there. But also then we have a goal, and it's that goal of wanting to get beyond global injustices, silencing, and the kind of oppression that is out there. So in other words, if I go back to that image of the community, as a community, we want to be transformative. And part of that is also wanting to be open and wanting to be inclusive. And that has been a long tradition in the journal. We have, from the beginning, very heavily focused on early career researchers, making sure that young people have a space in our journal, because actually so many of the people that published in the 1990s and the early 2000s, first in the journal, were very young researchers. But we have increasingly also added, together with the movement on decolonization, on being decolonial, I think I should say, we've also added this notion that we need to decolonize feminist publishing. And our journal, in a sense, is very complicit in the coloniality of the international publishing world. We publish mostly authors from the US and UK. So if we look at our statistics, for example, from 2024, we published 30 articles, research articles, I should say, and 18 of these, that is more than half, were from authors in the US and in the UK. In part, that can be explained because we publish in English, right? But there's many other countries in the world where English also is a language that is spoken. And even though, we have it means because we also have a lot of other countries represented, right? If you have 18 out of 30 being US and UK, that also means there's 12 others that are not US and UK, and that is already something, but it's simply not good enough. So we are interested in becoming more inclusive. And then I have this whole thing about desk rejects on this slide. One thing to understand is the vast majority of papers that come across our desk that are being submitted are being desk rejected. And very often those desk rejects are disproportionately from authors who are not in the Western Anglophone center. And the reason, so I mean, just to give you statistics again, we made 130 decisions in 2024, and 64 of those decisions were desk rejects, right? So this is almost half of everything that comes across is being desk rejected. And we think this is a problem. There is a number of different reasons for desk rejecting, but the biggest one, really big reason, is that there's just no match between the paper that is being submitted and what we are looking for. And so we can say, well, that's maybe a problem with the author, not quite looking at what the journal is about, and that very clearly is often the case. But we've also been asking ourselves as to whether we're not just being too narrow in terms of what we're looking for. And so we hope that this workshop, which ended up having many more people signed up than actually we expected, we were hoping that this would be a little bit of a conversation also as to what needs to be published, and we want to broaden what we are publishing, but it's the beginning of a conversation of saying, this is what we are typically publishing, and this is our scope. So let me just put a few words in on describing that. Can we have the next slide, please? So what we tend to publish is papers on feminist politics and intersectional gender critiques of various topics in the following areas, right? So there's always this feminist politics and the intersectionality, the decoloniality in that is very salient. But the typical topics come, of course, out of our background in the field of international politics. So we have a lot of papers on international security politics and war, on the women, peace and security agenda, on women participating in various armed conflicts and things of that nature. We also have papers on international economics and development, and by that I really mean mostly political economy. So we tend to have kind of a lot of work on gendered social reproduction, for example, and some of those issues, or the neoliberalization of various forms of feminist politics. We focus on transnational movement politics. We focus on international governance issues in international organizations, such as gender mainstreaming, for example, or international justice issues, human rights. So this is a kind of the core of our scope. Now, I emphasize this, that it is a core that we have been trying to push away from. So what we tend to reject then is, to begin with, often papers that do not focus on politics. So, for example, if you have papers narrowly focused on development economics, or something that tends to be more technocratic, that often comes out of development projects, we have tended to reject those, because often these papers are also not really very deeply anchored in academic literature. We tend to reject papers that are purely focused on national level politics, such as, for examples, and the examples I've cut out, but I have right here. But the examples, for example, voting behavior of women in a particular parliament is something that may be an excellent paper for another journal, but it's not something that we take typically on. But I think that also, again, with regard to national level politics, it's important to focus on the exceptions, because often many national level politics are connected internationally, transnationally, and have ramifications, or they're globally embedded. So when there's a focus on local phenomena that are tied to global dynamics, or that connect to international politics, we actually really welcome them. Civil wars may be considered local, but we publish on them because they always have international ramifications. Issues such as extractivism, is very often there's local struggles, but we're interested in it because there's global ramifications of this. An example is, for example, we recently actually published, and this is unusual, right, a paper on violence against women politicians in Malawi, which seems to be a local phenomenon, but violence against women in politics is a transnational phenomenon. It's there everywhere. And then that paper also brought in very nicely the way in which the internet was implicated in that. So there's boundary transgressing implications in papers like that, and we like those. And we would like to get more papers like that. Even though they may not be international relations, they address transnational and global phenomena. And with that, I would like to turn it over, actually, to maybe open it up to some conversation.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I would like to join my colleagues in welcoming all these people in our webinar today. I'm seeing here people from all over the place. We have people from Brazil, from India, from the UK, the US, and so on. So I would like to welcome you all. Please, if you have not presented yourself, feel free to do that. I haven't received any particular questions so far on the issues that Lisa raised about the desk rejects. I think this is a very important part, that people are not aware, when they have not been in the publishing world, that we actually desk reject more papers than they get rejected once they go out for review. So this is a very important issue for you that is thinking about submitting to our journal. Please do read our journal. That's a good way for you to know whether what you're doing fits the journal, right? It's reading the journal, knowing what kinds of things are getting published there, citing authors that have been published with us. This is a good way to manage to make your national issues in some way international, right? Thinking and building ideas of how that connects to larger issues that are important in different parts of the world. So I'm not sure if Amy or Swati want to join in and say a few words about this while we wait for any questions, or if we move on. Yes, Lisa, go on.
Well, actually, I'm just reading what the panelists, what the participants, sorry, have posted here. Thank you very much for introducing yourself. This is fascinating. And I would like to respond, actually, though. Smriti Suman writes from Allahabad, working on Hindi cinema, theory of cosmopolitanism and nationalism. Politics, culture, mass media. That is one of those areas where we're precisely saying, wow, this could be really interesting, right? Because if you look at Hindi, we don't publish a whole lot on cinema or on culture or even on literature, right? But we have been talking about that maybe we should be doing more of that. And in particular, if you can connect that to issues of nationalism, cosmopolitanism, and these local global tensions that also exist, that could be a really, really super paper that I would love to have a look at.
So Amitesh Kumar is asking if he or she wants to may ask the question. I don't think you can speak your question. You can type your question at the chat box and I will read them for you. I apologize. We apologize for this. I guess it's not as interactive as we would like, but the Zoom thing allows for so much. Amy or Swati, you want to join?
Natalia, I was just thinking that because we do have limited time and there may be questions later, so perhaps we could move on and people could, because there are overlaps with what Lisa just said and things that I want to share. And then maybe to the participants, here is your opportunity to type your questions there, and depending on what the situation is, Natalia, towards the end, we might even get few people into the conversation because we don't seem to have everyone who registered here, right? So we might be able to do that and people might be able to speak if we bring them in as speakers. But I wonder, Natalia, if I might have your permission to proceed.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Let's do what she is mentioning. I'm keeping track of all the questions, so you can put them down and I will read them at the end, or we will open for you to speak, as Swati mentioned. So yeah, move on. Swati, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks to my lovely colleagues here. It is wonderful to be here with you virtually, though. I am Swati Parashar. I'm joining from the University of Gothenburg. I'm a professor of peace and development. That is what the official title says. But yes, trained and researching on global politics. And I'm just delighted to be here and share some of the insights as part of this team that is your editorial team that looks after the IFJP. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what might be the kind of articles that we need to be thinking through, or what might be, writing with a difference. What might be things that you might consider as you plan to publish. The one thing that we want to acknowledge here is that there is a lot of pressure on colleagues to publish, right? I totally understand understand, particularly with colleagues, young colleagues from India. I know that there's a lot of pressure in South Asia where you have to publish in Scopus journals. That's the way to your promotions. That's the way to jobs. And so it's very, very tough. And therefore, it's important to understand that there are so many more opportunities today to publish, and which is why we decided to do this webinar, to actually tell everyone that we are a space that is very inclusive. We exist because we want you to publish with us, and how can we support you through the information that we have, through other ways that that you can submit your work to us, or you can consider us as you think about publishing. So we just want to put that up front. We are very interested in what you might want to submit to us, and that is why we are here. Okay, so we call ourselves the International Feminist Journal of Politics, right? So what does it mean to be feminist? And this is also a question that we often get, or, through the writings that we access or the submissions that we get. What is being feminist? How is it that feminism is articulated in the pieces that we receive, or how can you think about it? So although most of the work here that we publish seems to be, or to you it might appear to be, oh, it's kind of feminist international relations or feminist politics, but actually feminism is very broad in terms of how it understands politics and how it draws from political discourses. So it's very important to broaden this idea of feminism. So I can just tell you that it's not just feminism that is, of course, Western or located in Europe and America, but we are very interested in feminist politics or discourses coming from Latin America or Australia or Asia or South Asia, wherever you are located. We are very interested in that. So as you think about citations, what constitutes feminism? Just broaden your idea, because feminism is not just about citing all the Western scholars that you have heard of. It's very important that you cite from your own locations, your own geographies, your methodologies, epistemologies, what you are interested in, right? So and this I particularly am interested in sharing an anecdote. I once had at a conference, I had a young scholar from India, and that was a wonderful paper on marital rape and legislations around that. And I could see that they had cited all the feminist IR people that we all know, whether it was Cynthia or Anne or so many others that we read all the time, and there was not a single citation from India or Indian feminists. And we know that Indian feminists have been working on marital rape and other issues, sexual violence, for such a long time, right? And so I remember asking this question, and the response was that, well, I want to have a career in feminist IR. You can have a feminist IR career or whatever you want to do with IR with broadening your idea of feminism as well. We are not here building canons. We don't have boundaries. We don't have, particular fixed ideas of this is what, feminist politics looks like. It is always conversational, it is always dialogic, and it evolves, right? What is politics then? Of course, politics is central to the kind of work we publish. You could be writing an article which is more, history-based, which is more archival, which is more perhaps anthropological. And there are so many other journals that you could go to. And we are not saying here that if you draw from history or archives, that does not constitute politics. All we are saying is that we are interested in power, contestations, any kind of research commentary that is trying to understand the international, querying the international, not always about this idea that there is an international out there, but understanding that there are local and international are always in a dialogue. In fact, we have a special issue coming out soon on the local and global ideas, particularly global as a concept, right? So think about politics more broadly. We are also, as Lisa pointed out, very much interested in the decolonial project, right? So we have largely been publishing, we have tried to diversify who publishes, we are reaching out to people from different parts of the world, different kinds of knowledges, and we are very interested in decolonizing this space. So we have to consistently remind ourselves that knowledge is still a colonial project, right? Whose knowledge matters. We often talk about power being knowledge as well. And this is what we are trying to dismantle here, to tell you all that we are so interested in what you're doing in your parts of the world, in your universities and your research projects, right? The other important issue for us is to think through positionality and self-reflexivity in your projects, right? Very often when we get papers, we see that there's wonderful papers, but we don't get a sense of why the author is writing it, or why you might be interested in it. What might your own location be? What kinds of methods have you drawn from? So it's very important to locate yourself within the paper, to be able to acknowledge your privilege, acknowledge where you are, where the work is coming from, what kinds of inspiration is guiding it. It's very important to think about positionality. It's absolutely critical to feminist work anywhere and everywhere. A lot of the papers we get are case studies and empirical discussions, right? And they are very important because obviously we want knowledge from everywhere in the world. We want to know what's happening in Allahabad, for example. We want to know what's happening in Hindi cinema. We want to know what's happening in Kolkata. We want to know what's happening in Brazil. We have, a great interest in all the different empirics that you bring, but it's also important to embed it in a conceptual theoretical discussion. And it doesn't have to be a hierarchical process or a difficult, disjointed effort. You don't have to think that, okay, I have all this material, now how am I going to bring a theory that fits it? And very often this is the concern that a lot of young writers have, that, oh, okay, I have everything now, bring in the theory. So where do we bring the theory? So Foucault says this, or somebody else, Bourdieu says this, or I might draw from Judith Butler. Theory or concepts might just be around you. You don't have to go that far, travel that far. You have to think about anchoring your paper in the concepts and the theoretical frameworks that might be existing in your context as well. So being open to the idea of questioning theory and not making it as a tedious exercise of trying to fit theory somewhere. So that is also important to consider. We also have conversation section. We have regular articles, we have book reviews, as Lisa pointed out. We also have the conversation section. So have a look at the journal when you read it. You'll find it very interesting because this is a non-usual, it's not a usual academic journal article. It is different, it is shorter, it is more conversational, it is more, it can be between two or more people, it can be an interview, it can be a different kind of a format, that more creative format that you can adopt. So that's part of our conversation section that might be useful. So when we say different, it's still a journal article, right? So there are a few things that are basic that need to be there. Clear argument, which is the puzzle. What are you investigating? You can't have, and one of the mistakes that people make is usually they submit thesis projects, and so there are 5 objectives in the thesis, and we find that reflected in the article. You have to focus on just one thing, right? What is your methodology? You have to be clear about that. Also, increasingly, the ethics of doing that research. If you have done field research, it's very important to mention, ethics within that, ethical concerns. It should be of appropriate length, which any journal, in fact, this is a recommendation for every journal. Please stick to the word limit, because then we will end up, you'll end up in a terrible discussion, which is sometimes can be really taking time consuming. So it's important to submit of the exact length and relevant literature, right? When I say that, I don't mean that you can cite everything and anything. You can't. You have to choose in which literature your work is embedded. But it is important for the readers, for the reviewers, for the editors to get a sense that you have already read this and your work is going to add something new or something different to this. But it's important to give the readers a sense that you are locating yourself within decolonial literature, within Indian feminism, between sexual violence discourses, whatever that be, right? So the literature is important. And when we are thinking about, constantly we are saying, oh, we need innovative pieces, right? Innovation, basically, in the social sciences, we are not exactly, doing experiments and coming up with new kinds of, totally something that nobody has heard before. We're basically sometimes telling a story in many different ways. We can be telling the same story same ideas, but presenting it in so many different ways that we bring in different angles. And this is what gender and feminism is very good at it. That if you want to tell the story of war, when you bring in the gender lens, you are going to tell so many stories along those, unpacking the whole war, unpacking the war story. So telling new stories, right? Telling it in a very interesting, different way, where you bring in your voice, your touch to it. That's really important. So when we talk about difference, it's also the different formats that we must mention. As I just said, we have conversations, we have book reviews, we have typical journal articles. We also have call for special issues very often that you could participate in, which can take other forms of other format as well. So write because you enjoy writing. And I know that there is pressure on all of us to publish. Trust me, it's not easy anywhere in any location that we are in. For any growth in academia, you need to publish or perish, they used to say. But it's important to enjoy what you do, and that will make a good article. So don't take up tedious or trendy topics, just some things to remember. You need to have your heart in it. It's very important that you choose a topic that it's not that, oh, now suddenly there's a war in the Middle East. I am in Brazil, so although I don't work on it, but I'll start writing an article on the Middle East. It won't work because that's not your core interest, or you have knowledges which are very different and which may be specific to your area. So write on things that matter to you. And the important thing for us is to convey to you that we publish from a wide variety of locations, methodologies, conceptual, theoretical sites. In fact, we want to move more and more away from just very narrow West-centric, Eurocentric theories and ideas of feminism. So we are definitely very interested in diversity and difference, but it's important for us to, capture that in ways that can speak to a broader audience. We definitely want to publish your work, and that's why want with caps, right? That's why we are making all this effort to reach out to as many people as we can. And your work must speak to our readership. We do cater to a particular kind of readership. There are many journals, right? Every journal has its mandate. We also have a mandate. Within that mandate, we try to actually broaden it up in many ways. So we are very interested to publish your work. Keep that in mind when you are developing your pieces. When you write, very important, and this is what reviewers will point out, clarify terms and concepts that you use. Very often, if you're using indigenous terms or something from another part of the world that we may not be aware of, or you think the reviewers will find it, be very clear about using those concepts. Make sure that you have explained why you are using certain terms or certain theoretical models. Make that connection throughout. And something that we've said, retain your style and voice in your paper throughout, right? This is so important. It's your intellectual work. It should look like it is your work. This is how you will develop your career and your intellectual engagement with issues. You will have your ways of conveying things, typical. Maybe sometimes we use words. Everybody has a style, and you have to figure out what your style is. And it's important to retain that, because this is this is a feedback that we continue to get. I continue to get that, okay, so but what are you trying to say? These authors have said all of this. What is your contribution? So it's very important to do that. And thoroughly referenced. Referencing is something that we all have to learn. Nobody masters it. We continue to work on it. We have tools now. We have all sorts of assistants. I believe even AI is involved in referencing now. I cannot confirm that, but it's so important to be on top of referencing tools and getting help there. And very often the question to us is, how many references are good for a 9,000 word article? We really can't answer that, because it's your work, and you have to see what amount of referencing is good for you. But a good paper is kind of always embedded in literature that it is referencing. So it shouldn't be a worry if it's something that you've read, your field, and you want to kind of expand on that. And this is definitely my last slide. Do not send, and this is a few reminders. This is labor-intensive work that editors do, and to also remind you that some of you will be taking up this work in the future. this is work that we do over and above the other university duties we have, and we care. That is why we are here, and we put in our heart and soul to mentorship, to different kinds of ways to support people who want to write. So when you're thinking through publishing, it's a good idea to not send unfinished papers or thesis, or if you have policy papers that you've published, or if you've written term papers. Sometimes people do that, and it's disappointing for you because it goes into a desk reject straight. But for that you also have to wait to get a desk reject, and you've lost time which you should be using for writing it, constructing the argument. So read the articles, and that will give you a sense of where you are in the writing process. So don't submit to us unfinished work, because it's frankly takes away from the time that you could spend to write your work, develop your article. So as I said, read the article, definitely have a clearly defined puzzle. This is central to anything that you submit in a journal. One or two questions that there should be a puzzle. I don't want to call it hypothesis or questions, but there is a puzzle that you're exploring, right? And that's important to write. Again, reiterating that empirical pieces always need a conceptual framing. And this you should ask yourself this question, that I have this amazing data from anywhere, like from Rio. I've looked at the way politics works at the municipal level, and how women are perhaps how it is gendered in its language. It could be anything. I can't think of a better example right now, but you'll have to think about why the audience, the reader, should be interested in that paper, right? This is great empirical finding. This is what you found, and it's important, but how are you going to convey that importance to the rest of the world, right? What new findings are you bringing to public knowledge? And this is something that we say to our PhD students as well. In anything that we do in academia, the so what question. It's important to you, but so what? So what, as in what should it do to the others? What should it make other people think? So the so what question has to be there always in anything that we do, any article that we write, any thesis also that we actually think about for PhD PhD students. Do not, and this is an important bit of advice that we think that is valuable, might be valuable. Do not superimpose concepts and theories onto your findings, right? See if they fit. So don't look for theories outside. And this happens a lot. We get submissions which are looking at women in panchayat systems in India, right? But the theory that they borrow from is from Foucault, and that might not go. You might be interested in more local self-governance, or other kinds of theories about feminist politics that come from India. So why not look for theories and concepts? There's a lot of intellectual work that is coming from different parts of the world. It's important to draw from there. Don't try to fit theory into your work, and we don't go theory shopping, like, okay, this theory might fit that. So let it flow. Let that organic connection be made between the framework that you decide and the empirical work that you want to submit. So as we said, conversation pieces are a way to write in a non-academic way, but always focusing on embeddedness, privilege, location. This is central to feminist work. I know I'm just repeating, but it is so important to consider that. And my final point would be proofread once at least carefully. And we do, as in the journal, we have a wonderful proofreading system. We have our colleague does a great job of it, and we take care of it. But please proofread once. And language is not everyone's skill, right? It's not, even if we've been writing in English, I've been writing for many years, but I send my work to a friend who, or a colleague or somebody to have a look. So if you can make those arrangements where you have somebody who can look at your piece before the final, when you've been accepted and you want to submit, or even before that, when you're sending it in for review, make sure that you're proofreading, because very often reviewers pick on that, and it becomes a real kind of, a time issue for you and for us as well. So these are some of the things that I wanted to share with you, but with the open invitation that please consider submitting to us, but also follow some of these ideas that we are trying to share with you. We are here to support you. We are so interested in your work. Again, I keep repeating myself, but that's why we are here. So I will stop here, and Natália, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Swati. This was very heartwarming. So let's move on to Amy's final presentation, and then I have grouped here some questions that you have posed into topics, so I will hold them until the end because I think some of them will be answered by Amy in her how to submit bit. But if it's not, by the end, we'll come back to you, and yeah, please continue to drop in your questions to us. Amy.
Yes, excuse me. Thanks, Natália. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Lind. I am a professor in the School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Cincinnati. And I just want to mention also that I have been in the Department of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies for about 20 years. And I mention that because I've been in an interdisciplinary space for most of my career and come to the journal as an editor and also as an author in the past in this capacity. So I think a lot about what it means to write for a journal that has a particular set of themes, but when you're writing from different epistemological, but also methodological places, spaces, what are the things that you need to think about to fit into a journal space, and at the same time, you might want to be challenging some of the canons that come out of that journal space. So part of what I want to talk about is just the nuts and bolts of how to submit. And I see a couple of you have asked questions that I will cover, but I also just want to follow up from what Swati just mentioned. So I think this is a good follow-up to what Swati was talking about, because I think it's important to mention that has a group of editors that one of our primary, visions and goals has been to de-center Anglophone concepts and literature to the extent possible, which of course is a very difficult and contradictory project, as you know, when we're publishing in an Anglophone journal. But to the extent that, and Swati, I think, got at this in many ways, to the extent that I will get to this slide, Natália, but this is kind of just, I just wanted to, some thoughts I had after others have spoken. To the extent that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought now. So I will come back to this as I'm talking. So Natália, maybe switch to that slide. Yeah, so I mean, these are kind of some of the nuts and bolts aspects of what we wanted to share with you. Swati had mentioned follow guidelines. I mean, this is true for every journal, and it's a bit of a tedious process, as you know, but it's so easy to have your work not make it past the editor's desk when you haven't followed the guidelines, especially the word count and the formatting, I think are crucial for any journal to follow what that journal is asking of you. It just shows that you've at least done your homework, so to speak, in terms of preparing a manuscript for that particular journal. And it makes our jobs easier too. It makes it much easier for us to read them and consider sending them out instead of reading something that's much longer than what we can actually publish in our journal. Makes it nearly impossible for us to accept that, or we would have to consider it and think about how you could cut back, and so on and so forth. So to the extent that you can do all of that before you submit, that's very helpful. Because this is a peer-reviewed, double-blind peer-reviewed process, which means that you as an author are anonymous in the review process if we send it out, and I will explain that process in detail on the next slide. If we send it out for external review, reviewers don't know who you are, and you don't know who they are. In other words, the double-blind peer review process. So it's important to the extent possible, maintain your anonymity in your writing. If you're citing something that you've already published, you should remove it. For example, your name from the reference list and from the text until you can add it back in later on. But for the purpose of the review, keep that out. And you can include a bio, but later on you can include acknowledgements, because again, it's about maintaining anonymity in the review process. Natália, you can move on to the next slide.
I think it's Swati that has the control. Swati.
Apologies, Swati.
Yeah, we have.
So, yeah, so what happens after you send in your article? This is the process that that happens on our end, and what you will hear from us. So you first receive an acknowledgement email that we've received your manuscript. One of the 6 editors gets assigned your article, and we read and decide if it's ready to go out for external review. And so that's, I think, the part that Lisa in particular was talking about, that it's so important to know how to write, to submit something that is ready for external review, so we can send it beyond our desk to external reviewers. The reasons for desk reject, Lisa, I think, discussed that quite a bit. But once it does go out for external review, you will receive a message indicating that it's out for review, or you will receive a message, a letter stating that unfortunately we couldn't send it out for review because it wasn't ready. And as much as we can, we try to give you some feedback on why that's the case. So we find at least 2 external reviewers to review it. We wait for their reviews, and then the editor that's assigned to it, we read it. We have a second editor read it amongst us, at least. So there's always at least 2 of us who are reading it to make a final decision on whether we accept it. We accept it with revisions. We suggest to revise and resubmit, or we suggest that it's not ready for our journal at this time. And there can be so many different reasons at that point as to why a piece is rejected. It's not necessarily rejected because it's simply poorly written or something negative, but sometimes it's rejected because it's not the best fit for our journal. Although we try to address that earlier in the process, sometimes that comes up later on. Revise and resubmit is very common. We've all received many revise and resubmits as authors ourselves, and it's that's actually, I would consider that a positive response, because it gives you the opportunity to fine-tune some of your concepts or various aspects that the reviewers raise. and to resubmit and have it considered for publication. You will receive a letter that includes the reviewer narrative, so you do receive quite detailed information about how you could work on your revisions. And once your piece is accepted, we basically go through the copy editing stage and the proofs where you don't have. We're really asking you to just respond to the more editorial, like, minor comments, and to not add significant new information unless there's a reason to do so. The articles are always published online first, and then in the hard copy of the journal. As you know, most people are reading online versions more so than hard copies anyway, so that's very helpful to get them out online fairly quickly. We try, so I know someone asked about how long it takes for us to publish. It varies, but I would say that we try to publish, and Lisa or Swati or Natalia, please feel free to fill in here. We try to publish within 6 months or so. Sometimes it takes longer than that. And part of it is waiting for the external reviewers' comments. Sometimes reviewers are very prompt. Often reviewers, all reviewers are doing this on top of everything else they're doing. And so sometimes we find that it takes longer to get those comments back. Then we meet as an editorial team. And so it takes a little bit of time, but I think we have a fairly quick turnaround for the online publishing of your piece. It takes longer than that to publish the hard copy. And again, I think my colleagues can help fill in here, but part of it is because, and I wanted to get to this topic, that we have special issues and then we have quote unquote regular issues. So I know someone asked, when is your next call for papers? And actually, our call for papers is always open. So you can submit anytime, with the exception of our special issues. And Natalia, Swati, maybe you can switch to the next slide. I'm just going to give an example of an upcoming special issue that I'm involved in, which is something that we'll be posting on our website very soon. The topic is constructing transnational feminist resistances in times of crises. And one of my favorite parts of doing this job and working with this amazing group of people has been our conferences and the special issues that come out of the conferences. And we've had 3 conferences since we've been editors, and most recently in Mozambique. In 2023, it was held in Quito. And the idea of these conferences and these collaborations has been to work with feminist journals in the Global South, and to publish double special issues that come out in each of our journals. So for example, this special issue that's on the screen right now is one that I'm involved in. And the way that we will be doing this is that the IFJP special issue will be published in English. The Iconos special issue, which is based at Flaxo, Ecuador, will be coming out in Spanish. However, for this particular case, we're accepting submissions in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And with the idea that accepted submissions in Spanish, in in any of those languages will be published in the language of the journal. I will say that we're also discussing the possibility of publishing some articles in more than one language in the journal. That's a question that we've been discussing in terms of decentering Anglophone academia and the Anglophone world, and also just thinking about translation and the extent to which and how we can represent that in a journal that is English primarily. I several years ago, just to give you an example, I had co-authored a book review essay for this journal way before I became an editor that was of Spanish and Portuguese language publications that I wrote with a person who works in Brazil on how these publications shed light on the work that's being done in English. And, that's one way to bring in other kinds of work that's being done in other languages. One of you asked about, how do you, I'm paraphrasing here, but how do you prepare if you're working in another language and want to write for this journal? And I know that that's a real challenge, right? To first of all, you're trained in a particular way to write in a certain language, and it's different from perhaps how we're trained to write articles in English. And even just within English, of course, we're having all these different discussions about what constitutes a well-written article, if you will, or, I think feminist scholars in particular have, opened that discussion much more to think of different creative ways that we can write. Having said that, what I would suggest is a couple things. First of all, we're here to answer questions, to give you informal feedback if you wish, outside the formal review process. Second, I think it's really important to ask other people to read your work. So if you're writing, if you're typically writing in Portuguese and you want to know if your submission, you're writing in English for this journal, you want to know if your submission is structured the way that you think IFJP would kind of be legible, if you will, to an Anglophone audience, I suggest that you ask people around you who have published in English to read your article or submission. I suggest that you get as much feedback as you can. And I know sometimes the tendency is to not want to ask other people to read our work, but the more eyes that you have on your work before you submit it, the more prepared you're going to be and the better your submission will be. So I really encourage that, as you're to proofread, but also to ask other people to read your work and engage with people about it before you submit it. And that's one way also to address that question of how you're organizing your ideas and how you're presenting it, in one language versus in another. I hope that, that's a kind of a partial answer to that question, I guess. I think I will end there, and we can move on to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Amy. So yeah, now I have received some questions here. I have organized them Questions about process, I think they have been answered by Amy, but I can take them on briefly. There are questions about content, and there are questions about style. So I'll just flag up the questions about process because I think they are easier to respond. And I think Amy already have done that, but Silk Steinhilber, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. So how long is the turnover from submission of a paper to getting noticed, reference, revisions, or rejection? Mahagad has asked, when is the next call for papers for publishing? And Dr. Ruth has asked, she's a postdoc at the Center for Feminist Research at York University, Canada. And she asked, could you advise if you accept papers that include images or art illustrations, which have been generated from research data as part of my analysis and engage expression of the research? So for Silk, I would say, Amy has already answered this, but it can take different amounts of time depending on how many revisions your paper requires and on the length the reviewers of your particular paper take to get the reviews to us, the feedback to us. So it's not rocket science here. You can't calculate everything by time, but we try to give responses about desk rejects within 15 to 30 days. That's what we try to do. We are noticed by our managing editor every 15 days of new submissions. So we're required to reply to that in the same amount of time. So if you're being desk rejected, you should know that soon. If not, your paper is going to review, and that can take different amount of time depending on the process. Most of our papers, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but I think most of our papers go through a couple of rounds of review, 2 rounds of review. Some of them require just 1 round. Some of them have required 4 rounds of review. So it all depends on how many rounds of review your particular piece will require, but we try to make it as speedy, as fast as we can. In reference to when is the next call for papers for publishing, we have an open flow. You can submit your an open call for submission. So you can submit your piece anytime. You just log into the Scholar One system and make your submission. But as Amy also mentioned, we do have special issue calls. So some of them refer to the topics of our conferences. Some of them are people from our community submit proposals for particular special issues, and they can have open calls within them. So you can also look up our website for that. We can type in shortly our website here if you have not already found that. And you can see if there are open calls for particular special issues that you may get interested in publishing with. And then the timeline for those are more specific, okay? And for Dr. Ruth, concerning images or art illustrations, I'm not sure I'm totally qualified to respond to that, but yes, we do publish pieces with images and graphics. So feel free to send them. There are Ben Woolhead, which is who is our managing editor, will respond to you if you need to do some particular indication of how this is supposed to be included in the piece. But yeah, we can include that. Not sure if any of the other co-editors would like to add concerning these questions on the process.
Just to say, Natalia, yes, art illustrations, they're great. Yeah, I don't think we've ever been pushed back. If anything, it used to be the publisher saying it's too expensive, but now everything is online. So we haven't gotten any pushback on that ever at all. So I would totally encourage that. It's not a problem. We can deal with that.
Perfect.
Yeah, I read a question, Natalia, if I may. I can see a question on my screen at least, which is asking about the paper regarding women protest and the way particular Hindi cinema is incorporating it. Although it is specific to Indian nationalist struggle, what makes it global is the way women across the world are resisting against patriarchal nature of modern nation states across the globe. So thank you for your question, Smriti. And I understand that this is the research that you're doing. And as Lisa said, that these kinds of things can be really interesting. I'm sure that if we had time, it would have been great to hear about people's projects. But you're right that there is a global, resistance to patriarchy, right? We all know that states are being resisted in many different ways. There is also, there's also so much that is going on everywhere in terms of populism, authoritarianism, backlash, anti-feminist backlash, so much happening. I think it's important to, even if you're writing on Hindi cinema or Indian nationalism, it has to, and it is, everything is global in a way, but it has to tell some story that does not just remain within the context of India, where you could be publishing, for example, in a media journal, right, where they analyze films, or you could be publishing in a history journal where they do, and there are journals dedicated to cinema as well. So when you bring your article to us, there has to be a certain story that we need to see, which is about politics, which is about gender, which is about, the feminist debates that India has had, and how do you situate it within the international context. So I would say that these are good thoughts that you have, but when you say that, people are resisting against patriarchal nature, that is if that is the connection that you have to the concept of the global, I would say that you can explore much more. You can go deeper into it and perhaps use that as an example when you want to discuss Hindi cinema, and perhaps related. I mean, a lot of Hindi cinema is to do with global politics, so I think we can have a separate chat about it at some point. I just wanted to say that great thoughts, but think a little bit more broadly, not just in terms of what is being resisted, because that resistance is happening everywhere. Yeah, and
Thank you,
there was just one more question, if I can just respond, and I'll just hand it over to you. Decolonization of Amitesh, I think somebody called Amitesh Kumar. Decolonization of knowledge systems falls into the trap of essentialization of knowledge and creates binarization. As a young scholar, we struggle with these challenges and how to escape that when we want to write on indigenous knowledge systems and feminist perspectives. Yes, I mean, there is also the concern with decolonial politics. It is also about to what extent do we decolonize, how far back do we go? What is it that we reclaim when we think about decoloniality? What is it that we are bringing when we say that, oh, we need to decolonize? But what? Like, I'm looking at you, Amitesh. I'm assuming your name's, you're from India. There's a big debate in India about decoloniality, but how far back do you go? What knowledges are supposed to be prioritized and discussed and reclaimed? What is it that has been erased? Erasure and silencing itself is being debated, right? There are contesting silences also, contested erasures. So how do we understand that? And what we in IFJP do very consciously also make an effort to that effect is to understand that that we are all complicit in these structures, and to get out of it is to acknowledge that we don't want to be part of any canon building, right? We are not interested in creating a group of feminists who are doing post-colonial, decolonial work, and they are the only ones doing it. We acknowledge here that these are productive discussions that are happening in many different parts of the world, and we actually, through our journal, want to link to those discourses and access them. We are not dictating here or telling you this is what post-colonial, decolonial project is. What is a decolonial project to us here is very different to what is happening in Brazil or Rio or in Kazakhstan or somewhere in Japan. So there are many different layers to this, and we want to connect to those discourses. We don't have, this binarization is exactly what we are resisting in so much of the work that we do. It's not West versus the non-West. We are also saying it's not global South South versus the global North. We are saying there is a South in the North, there's a North in the South. Every society has its elite structures and how knowledge is produced via the elite. So we are thinking about a lot of these things. It's precisely this essentialization and binary thinking that we try to dismantle and connect to processes and decolonial projects in other parts of the world. So this is my brief answer, but yeah, Natália, over to you.
Thank you, Swati. You've taken a couple of questions already. So there are a couple more on content, and I think they connect to each other and they connect to what Lisa has said in her presentation. So maybe she can take these on. Deepta Chopra has asked, thank you very much for this. I wanted to know more about movement politics. Would you publish, for example, a comparative paper on 2 or more countries and their movements, but not necessarily transnational movements? And Adriana Alvarez has also asked, by politics, does it have to be formal politics, as it has a broader sense of everyday choices and decisions that impact a community? For instance, how women leaders do local politics that go beyond their territories. Lisa, would you like to respond to that?
Yes. Thank you for those 2 questions. Deepta, movements are such an interesting space, and I think for our journal, feminist movements are always somehow, by definition, something we want to do. I don't know, they're just transnational, international, global. We hesitate often to do purely comparative papers, and so that comparativeness, it really depends on the paper. Like, for example, we have actually in the past few years published quite a few papers on resistance to backlash. And often these papers are national or comparative. And we publish them because we know that backlash is out there. It's all over the place. It's connected. And even if the papers not always make the connection, we have found it to be so important that we say we have to publish this. It's just because it's a global phenomenon. So the movement is kind of a sweet spot for us, because we like to publish on the movement, and so we probably are not as rigid as when it comes to women's participation in parliaments or something like that. Then what are the correlates of women talking more or less? That's less interesting to us than movement politics. That's a wishy-washy answer. I realize that, right? Because I can't strictly say no, we don't do comparative, because it's actually not true for movement politics. We think it's important, and we're part of a conversation, and so that's why we like to publish on that. So if you have a paper like that, I would encourage you to send it to us. And then Adriana's question on politics. Politics is everything, right? Politics is we are political animals. We're engaging in politics. Politics is private. This is all feminism has taught us that politics is everywhere. So no, we don't think of politics as only happening in the state and in the institutions. It's definitely a very, very broad understanding of what politics is. So yeah, if that's what you're working on, I think it was leadership, please, you have a home in this journal.
Yeah, and just to add a little concerning Dr. Ruth's question here that I think Lisa already answered, but does it extend to everyday struggles for freedom in post-colonial society? So yes, but just make sure our journal is in the intersection between feminism and international politics. So we would also like to have a gender lens or some feminist approach to these politics that are happening on the everyday lives of post-colonial societies. So bear that in mind as well. So I have couple more questions. Now I have grouped them as questions about style. So Amy has already had a go at Clausia Faganello's question, how to maintain style when English is not the native language. Do you have some tips? And Urmi Gupta has asked, I'm interested in narrative-based research, but what I have realized is writing narratives can be really difficult if one is not good with language. One can have the right sense in concepts and great field work experience, but writing creatively and putting it across can be extremely challenging. Some guidance for narrative-based writings, especially on wars and conflicts, would be helpful. Thank you. I'm not sure who would like to take that. Maybe Swati or Lisa, anyone who wants. I would just say a little some things that prior to being a co-editor of the main section, I have been a conversations editor for our journal. And I think the conversation section has a lot of non-English speakers submitting to us. So we had it, and the good thing about conversations is that you get into one-on-one conversations with the editors, the conversations editors, which means your piece is not going out to peer review, to blind peer review or anonymized, peer review. But it does get very detailed feedback from our two co-editors for the conversation sections. And they are really willing to work with you in making your voice be heard in the way you want it to be heard. So if that's something that appeals to you, do read some of our pieces on the conversation section. And I think you can have a sense of how creative your writing can be and how it can keep some of your style, even though the translation, something gets lost in translation. I don't think you can think of translation as capturing. Perhaps you have you will find out you have your own style in different languages. I myself find that when I write in Portuguese or when I write in English, I feel I have different styles. And so think less as a translation and try to, forge your own way of your own style of writing in English. You can and have fun doing it, as Swati said. I think that is the way to capture what you're trying to say. But yeah, I will pass on to Lisa, who wanted to respond as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few words on this language issue, because of course it's a huge one, right? And we get a lot of papers from people who are not native English speakers. As a matter of fact, I mean, even among the editors, right? We are not all native English speakers. And it gives me an opportunity actually to say something about our community again. To begin with, there is a sensitive, we usually know if somebody is not a native speaker, right? I mean, you read something and there's awkward formulations, and we, of course, as editors also know where you're coming from. So because we have your email address and your affiliation and so on. So we know where you are. And coming from there, we take that into consideration when we make decisions. Because we also know certain things can be fixed relatively easily, right? Whereas, others are more complicated, but certain things can be fixed. I also would like to say something about our reviewers. Our reviewers are a community of feminists who are very much attuned to some of the same issues that we have been discussing here. And I have been struck, actually, now having read as many reviews that I've read, because we get to read all the reviews also. Some of those reviews are just fantastic. I wish I would know how to review like that. So it's people really being able to put their mind into thinking what the author is trying to do, and telling them how to do that better, right? And some people are just fantastic with that. So I think that's just to say that there is a sensitivity here with regard to different languages, and there is reviewers who will be working with you. Plus, we have actually a copy editing phase where people have already talked about Ben, who is like the best copy editor in the world. If I could buy him, I would buy him. And then we often actually, when we realize that a paper needs a really, really deep copy editing, we actually use some of the funds that we have as journal editors and hire additional copy editing support from the outside. So that's just to say, don't be scared about that, because it's a very much a reality of the paper. Now it raises that interesting question about writing, narrative writing, and I'm not going to say much about that because I actually don't have an answer to that. Just to say that is just so difficult. I find that also really difficult, and I don't know. Urmi, it is, I think, right? I'm not sure what you were trained in, but as somebody who's trained in the social sciences, I just admire people who do good narrative writing. I don't know how to do it. I just, I watch others. Swati, you probably have better answer to that. That's like your field. And Swati's writes like that, actually.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I don't think this is the forum to actually discuss this, but to tell you all that I'm, Lisa, I work with the Creative Interventions in Global Politics. Two of the editors of this journal are also involved in a book series with Roman Littlefield, which is looking at creative interventions, where we look at narratives and autoethnographies and poetry and novels. And we've just had fantastic books coming out of that series as well. But just to tell you now, there is so much space. Our journal doesn't have to be the answer to everything that you have. You can submit it to so many. There is the Journal of Narrative Politics. You could submit it to them, perhaps. And we are not here to discourage you from doing that. We are here to tell you that our journal has a mandate, and within that, we try to expand as much as we can. And Urmi, I think that question is a very fair one, because I also, my mother tongue is Hindi, and not even Hindi, actually. It's one of the local dialects of Hindi in North India. So it's not, and I think the tyranny of English is just, it's particularly for those of us who were educated in the English medium, and then I have worked a lot outside, and it's very difficult to get out of that, and you're always conscious of. That's why I said that although I speak and think and even write in English, it's not my language, and I always worry about words and whether I have the right expression. The one thing that has helped me, though, I wasn't a great writer when I started my writing career or whatever academic career, but I have developed, as Natália was saying, and as I also emphasized, a style that you need, which makes you comfortable. When I write, I cannot use big words. I cannot use very jargonistic, and sometimes that language is beautiful. Some people write in that very esoteric, very, very nice abstractions that I like to read, but I cannot write like that. If it is a dog on the road, it's a dog on the road for me. So I'm saying that, it's very straightforward, but through what you're trying to convey, you can also convey beautiful things through that. And I have tried to practice that. I have no aspirations of being a writer who writes in the Spivakian mode, but let's not even get there, because Spivak has recently gotten into trouble with a few things that are avoidable discussing here. You have to write in what you are comfortable in. The style, simple language. We do not look at papers and we're like, oh, this is not academic language. If there is a construction that is telling a story, there is usage of words put together, strung together, it does the job. I mean, you don't have to think about, if you don't want to use discourse, and if you want to just say that how people are having conversations, that's perfectly fine, or I don't know, what are the words? My colleagues should help me. Very often we are always replacing words, if you don't want to use othering, it's fine. If you don't want to, we should do a mapping of academic words that we normalize and that excludes people, and they think, okay, is this? So all I'm saying is that it's possible to write in basic language, basic English language that we all perhaps trained in the language have. We don't have to aspire to be people that we're not, or write in a difficult way. And as Lisa said, we have a fantastic copy editor. We get a lot of help from them, but more importantly, see where and that is also part of the research that we do. See where your work fits in. If this journal is not the right space, there is so many spaces now to publish, and part of the problem is that we don't find that information. I can tell you that 15, 20 years ago, when some of us started our careers, there was not a lot of space where we could publish. There was a lot of gatekeeping. It was very hard to publish. Now what I say, I use the term good gatekeepers. We have a lot of good gatekeepers who are opening up spaces for people to publish. I benefited from it, and I hope that some of us doing this labor here in this journal are able to open those spaces for you. So make use of those opportunities. Yeah.
Natalia, did you have any other questions? Because
I don't think so, unless I missed something.
I think there was one question that I can't find now anymore either, but I noted it down about interdisciplinarity from somebody who's a PhD student in law. I think it was Leiden or something. I can't exactly remember. And I just want to respond to that particular question because I wish we would have more papers from international law people. There's so much interesting work that's going on there, and so many interesting connections to be made. So yeah, I mean, it was interesting to hear Amy start out her presentation by pointing out that she has been working in an interdisciplinary place for most of your career. And I don't even think, Amy, you don't even self-identify as international relations, right? You keep saying that, right? So yeah, we're trying to get away from this IR-centric understanding of the world and international law, feminist international law, I should say, because there's different kinds. Is a super interesting space as far as I'm concerned, and I hope you look at us as a potential outlet for your work.
Can I just say one thing which is perhaps not exactly related, but it occurred to me that it is important, this forum might be important to mention. When you get reviews back, right, that is the most interesting phase, because some people get very devastated with reviews, right? They are like, okay, you know, I thought my work was good, but this is very critical. Sometimes we get good reviews, but sometimes we also get reviewers' view of it, which may not be favorable. It is very important to not be demotivated, because that becomes an obstacle to learning and doing things. You don't have to take it personally. Sometimes, as editors, we also moderate. We see what the review. If the conversation, if the reviewer's comments are in a language that we feel is unacceptable, we are careful. And actually, nobody does that in academia. We are also collegial and we write good reviews. But whatever that be, if you feel discouraged, it will become an obstacle. So every time you get a review, at least my approach would be, feel good that somebody spent that time, read your piece, and perhaps there is something to improve. So never get demotivated with any reviews that you get. As Natalia said, there are pieces that have gotten reviewed n number of times before they became perfect and before they were published. So don't ever take that as a commentary on your writing skills or what you do or who you are. Separate all of that, see it as a comment on that article and try to work on it. Yeah.
Can I just follow up on one thing? One thing that surprised me, actually, being an editor, and I didn't know this, shouldn't maybe have surprised me, is that I don't think I can remember a single piece that we have accepted without going out for revise and resubmit again. I mean, that just doesn't exist. Right now, all papers go back to the authors. So when you get a revise and resubmit, that's really good. That means you have not been desk rejected, right? That's already 50%. It means that you have made it through the first round and people find it worth revising this paper because it's good and it has the potential of being published. So really expect a revise and resubmit, and then just be grateful if you have reviews that make sense and are helpful and help you improve the paper.
And as you revise your paper, do not think you need to respond to everything the reviewers are asking of you. Sometimes the reviewers do not agree amongst themselves about the main issues with the piece. So it's important to see what the editor is highlighting in their response. because they may point you towards what's more important, considering the scope of the journal, considering what we are looking for, as Lisa mentioned. So make sure, if you're not responding to a particular issue, to clarify why you're not responding to that as well. You are entitled to send a letter explaining your revisions. So make sure you respond, you engage with the reviewers and the editors. Do not necessarily engage in a way that you will do exactly what they're asking of you, but in the sense that you pondered about that, you reflected about that, and you have a reason for not including that, or including that in a different way than what's being said to you. Okay, so make sure you have the general feedback on your mind when you're responding to all of them, and maybe you don't have to respond to all of them.
Maybe I'll just jump in here and add to that. I mean, I think that's a really important point, that when we get reviews back of how we react to them, and I'm saying we because I'm thinking of myself both as an author and an editor, but sometimes it is really hard to read the reviews and not take it personally. I think our external reviewers, I mean, we have just been working on an updated version of suggestions for our external reviewers, and to create an ethos of reviews that are generative, productive, and not just critical and negative in that gatekeeping way. And to the, we can't entirely control that, but we encourage that. And so when you receive these reviews, and as Natália said, you don't have to respond to everything. If you feel strongly that one of the points, even if one of us as the editors included it in our cover letter to you, if you feel that it's not entirely accurate, you might want to, I mean, to the extent that you can show us why you wouldn't respond to that in a certain way, you can do that as part of your response. I do think it's important to follow the guidance of the journal editors in the response, in terms of if they're pointing out a couple of items out of the 10 or 15 items that the external reviewers bring up in their reviews, that you would want to really focus on those in particular. But you don't have to respond, you don't have to change everything. In other words, just because the reviewers think that you need to. And sometimes that also gets at that question of different, the fact that we're using different authors or different theories from different places, spaces. And so it's more about just being able to present your ideas and show why they're relevant beyond your own community, beyond your own epistemological community, and so on, to the audience that reads this journal. Hopefully that's helpful.
Okay. Is this it? We have gotten many exciting feedback here from you about this webinar, how useful it was. So we're really glad we could do this. Yeah, please contact us if you have any lingering questions, or if you digest what we've talked here and find out you have more questions. So do not hesitate to contact us. We also have an FAQ session in our website that is very comprehensive. You can go those questions, especially concerning the kinds of pieces. Ooh, apparently my connection is not stable. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Yeah. Okay. So make sure you can find issues there that you can clarify concerning conversations or even book reviews. Our book review session publishes more than one type of book review. Our conversation section publishes different formats and is open to more creative formats for your writing. Everything you think is important but maybe does not fit into the academic article paper can be a match for our conversation section. So you can also contact our editors for the specific sessions if you have a particular question. So yeah, browse through our website as well, and you may find answers for your questions there as well. Yeah, we're not sure about the next conference yet, but yeah, follow our social media. I'm not sure, Lisa and Swati, you have been answering here, but I think it's only for the host and the speakers. So I think our guests are not able to read what you're writing, so that's why I'm copying what you're saying for them. So Lisa is saying here, we are just discussing the next conference, so do follow our social media for that. And Swati, if you can republish the link here for everyone, thank you. Okay, I think this is it. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. It was, we apologize for the format. We received more than 200 people responding to this webinar. If they were coming, we thought this format would be better, but considering that we only had about 40 people, we might have had a more open conversation. But that's the thing with the online, we're never sure what's going to happen. So thank you. We hope to see your manuscripts in our journal. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Take care.
Should I just end this? Yeah. I think I'll just copy the comments before I'll just kind of do a cut paste. I'll just save the comment somewhere. Okay, so we have everything. And now I just go out of it. See you, Amy. I think we did a good job.